"I don't think I can do it anymore," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, sounding shaky even to me. I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince more, him or myself. Drake's eyes narrowed, those sharp green eyes, flashing with something dark. In a heartbeat, he closed the distance between us, his hand catching my wrist, and before I could even think to pull away, my back was against the door. I felt the hard press of him, every line of muscle in his body rigid with anger. His face hovered just inches from mine, his breath hot on my skin. And then his mouth was on mine, hard, desperate. The kiss was so intense, it felt like he was trying to brand me with it, like he could hold me there forever. His hand moved up, his fingers tangling roughly in my hair as his lips demanded I stay, as if that kiss alone could somehow change everything I just said. When he finally pulled back, my head was spinning, my lips bruised and tingling. He looked at me, and the command in his voice sent a shiver through me. "Don't ever say that again," he growled. "You're not allowed to leave me, not now, not ever." His words cut right through me, leaving me breathless and shaken. I could feel the weight of them sinking deep into me, and part of me knew he meant every syllable. But as much as I loved him, God, I did. I felt trapped, torn between this fierce connection and the nagging feeling that I couldn't keep going like this. Not anymore. Flashback. 2 years ago. It was my first day at my very first job, and I was practically buzzing with excitement. I had just graduated, and thanks to my fine GPA, I managed to land a position at this prestigious company. The office was bright and sleek, filled with people who were all so friendly and welcoming. I couldn't believe how lucky I was. But then I saw him. Drake, the CEO. He was like a storm walking into a room, tall and muscular with an aura that made everyone around him quiet. The moment our eyes met, a jolt shot through me, sending shivers down my spine. It was as if he could see right through me, like I was standing there completely naked, exposed. There was something intimidating about him, something dangerous that made me want to run and hide. But maybe that's what made him so appealing. I was captivated and terrified all at once. He held himself with such confidence, and the sharp green of his eyes felt like they were scanning my every thought. I could feel my heart racing as he turned away, his presence lingering in the air like a spell I couldn't shake off. I knew right then that this was not a man to be messed with, and honestly, I had no such plans either. 3 months later. My first few months in the job passed better than I expected. I was feeling pretty good about things. I was working on a new project that I really believed in, and despite my nerves, I was starting to find my groove. But then one day my manager suddenly went MIA, and I was left on my own to update the CEO on our progress. My heart was racing as I approached Drake's office. I was scared and nervous, but I couldn't let that stop me. I took a deep breath, smoothed my shirt, and opened the door. The moment I stepped inside, I was hit by the intensity of his presence. He was leaning back in his chair, his muscular frame commanding the room, sharp green eyes focused intently on the screen in front of him. Hi, Mr. Drake," I stammered, feeling a heat rising in my cheeks. "I wanted to give you an update on the marketing strategy." He nodded, and I took a cautious step forward, clutching my folder tightly. I stumbled a bit over my words, trying to maintain my composure while the electricity in the air was palpable. As I started sharing the details of the project, I noticed him leaning forward, his interest piqued. My confidence swelled a little as I continued. "We've implemented new social media campaigns, and the engagement metrics are really promising." Just as I was gaining momentum, my foot caught on the rug, and before I could even react, I was tumbling forward, landing right on his lap. My face flushed with embarrassment, and I scrambled to get back on my feet, mumbling apologies as I sat up. "Sorry, I didn't mean to," I stuttered, my heart racing, not just from the fall, but from the heat radiating off of him. The contact was electric, and I could feel his body tense beneath me, sending a wave of embarrassment and something else, something thrilling through me. Drake looked startled, his eyes wide for a moment before a smirk crept onto his lips. "You okay there?" he asked, his voice low. I wanted to die from humiliation, but couldn't help but notice how his gaze lingered on me, a flicker of something dangerous behind those sharp green eyes. I scrambled back to my feet, my cheeks burning hotter than ever. I mumbled more apologies, feeling flustered and actually aware of how close we had just been. The air between us felt charged, and I could sense an unspoken tension swirling in the room, a magnetic pull that made it hard to breathe. Let me just leave the file here," I said, my hands trembling as I placed it on the desk. I could feel his gaze burning into me, and I had to fight the urge to look back. The chemistry between us was almost suffocating, like a storm about to break. "Just leave it and go," he said, his voice slightly strained, and I could tell he was trying to maintain his professional demeanor despite the obvious heat of the moment. I nodded quickly and walked out, feeling that something had shifted between us, something exciting yet terrifying, leaving me wondering what it all meant. 2 months later. 2 months had passed since that awkward meeting in Drake's office, and things had been steadily heating up between us. I could feel the tension every time we were alone, but we hadn't crossed that line yet, so when Drake invited me to accompany him to an informal meeting with some investors, my heart raced with both excitement and nerves. We arrived at a sleek upscale bar where the investors were already lounging, drinks in hand. They seemed more interested in having a good time than discussing business, and I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy about it. Drake, however, was his usual charming self, handling their banter with ease, but I noticed something else. He was hesitant to drink. "Come on, Drake, live a little," one of the investors urged, pouring him another drink. I could see Drake's face flush slightly, and I could tell he was trying to hold back, but the group kept pushing, and I felt a sense of unease growing in my stomach. As the evening went on, I watched Drake's demeanor change. His cheeks turned red, and he started sweating as the drinks piled up. I knew he had a low alcohol tolerance, but the way they were coaxing him made it hard for me to intervene. Finally, after a particularly loud laugh from the group, Drake raised his glass one last time and downed it. I could see he was struggling, his usually sharp green eyes starting to lose focus. Somehow the meeting wrapped up well and the investors staggered off, laughing and high-fiving each other, but the moment they left, Drake staggered, his legs giving way beneath him. Panic surged through me as I rushed to catch him, helping him to his knees. "Drake, are you okay?" I asked, my voice laced with concern. "I'm fine," he slurred, but I could see the truth in his eyes. He was clearly not fine at all. With nowhere else to go, I made the decision to check into a nearby hotel. It felt strange but necessary. Once we were in the room, I helped him lie down on the bed. He was still sweating, and I hurried to grab a cold cloth to wipe his forehead. I tried to ignore the way my heart was racing, how close we were, and how worried I was about him. Just as I stood to change the water, I felt his hand grab mine. "Harper," he said, his voice a low murmur. I was shocked, trying to pull away, but he held on tight. There was a strength in his grip, and a part of me felt trapped by my own desire. "Drake, you need to rest," I said, my voice shaky, but he wasn't having it. "Stay with me," he insisted, and suddenly all the feelings I had kept hidden bubbled to the surface. My heart raced as I looked into his eyes, those piercing green eyes that had haunted my thoughts for weeks. Before I could respond, he pulled me closer and kissed me. It was unexpected, but my body responded instantly, melting into him. I found myself kissing him back, my hands weaving into his hair. The kiss deepened, and in that moment, everything shifted. I felt the weight of everything I had been holding back, the longing, the frustration, the love. It was overwhelming, but I didn't want to stop, and neither did he let me. 2 weeks later. It had been 2 weeks since that unforgettable night at the hotel. I woke up early the next morning, slipping out of bed and trying to tiptoe my way out before Drake could wake up. I didn't want to face the morning light or the reality of what had happened. I was still trying to wrap my head around it all. Since then, I have been doing my best to avoid him. Thankfully, it wasn't too hard since he was the CEO, always buried in meetings and high-level discussions. But every time we crossed paths, I felt that electric connection in the air. There was this hungry look in his eyes that left me feeling exposed, as if he could see right through my carefully constructed walls. Each time, he seemed like he wanted to say something, but I always found a reason to slip away before he could. Today, though, was different. He called me into his office, and I had no choice but to go. My stomach was in knots as I approached the door, wondering what he wanted to discuss. The moment I stepped inside, I was met with that same intensity I felt before. Drake got up from his desk and walked over to me, and for a second I was frozen in place, caught between the urge to lean in or step back. But instead of kissing me, as I had wishfully expected, he closed the door behind him, the click echoing in the otherwise quiet room. I turned to say something, anything to break the tension, but before I could get a word out, his lips crashed into mine. It was like a dam had burst, and all the feelings I had been holding back flooded to the surface. I melted against him, our mouths moving together in an urgent rhythm. The kiss was intense, igniting a fire within me that I hadn't realized was there. I lost track of time, caught up in the moment, but when my lungs began to burn, I finally pulled away, breathless and dazed. "What are you doing?" I gasped, trying to gather my thoughts. He looked at me, a mix of desire and frustration on his face. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice low and intense. No, it's not like that," I stammered, my mind racing. I didn't know how to handle everything. It was all so sudden." He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the night you fell in my office. You just ran away that morning. Why?" My heart raced at his words. I don't know, it was all too much. You're my boss, and I don't want to complicate things." He shook his head, frustration evident in his expression. "Nothing else matters to me except that you're mine now." Before I could respond, he leaned in again, capturing my lips with his in a softer kiss this time. It felt like a promise, a reassurance that maybe I wasn't alone in all of this. I let myself melt into the kiss, feeling my resolve weaken. With that kiss, I felt a shift. It was like all the fears I had been carrying melted away. I could feel the warmth of his body against mine and the sincerity in his touch. Somehow in that moment, everything felt right, and I accepted my fate. I pulled back slightly, searching his eyes for any hesitation. Instead, all I saw was determination. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "More than anything," he replied, his gaze steady and sincere. And just like that, I found myself falling deeper, ready to embrace whatever came next. A few weeks later, Drake and I had been officially together for a few weeks, and honestly, I was still trying to adjust to everything. On one hand, I loved the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the room. On the other, there was this intensity about him that was both thrilling and a little terrifying. Tonight, we were out at a fancy restaurant for dinner. I tried to focus on the meal in front of me, but I could feel Drake's eyes on me the entire time. It was flattering, but it also made me a bit nervous. As I glanced around the room, I noticed a couple at a nearby table looking our way, and I felt the heat of their gaze. Drake must have sensed my discomfort because his demeanor shifted. "What are you looking at?" he asked, his voice low but laced with an edge. "Just people watching," I replied, trying to play it cool. "Why?" "Why, what?" "Why look at them when I'm right here?" I laughed at his childlike banter, but it took me a second to realize he was serious. "God, I was just watching them. I'm here with you." He leaned in closer, his green eyes narrowing slightly. "They don't matter. You're mine, Harper. Don't forget that." I swallowed hard, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. There was a possessiveness in his tone that made my heart race, but also sent a shiver down my spine. "I know," I said softly, my eyes locking with his. "I'm yours." "Good," he said, his voice softening just a bit. But then I noticed how his grip tightened on my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles almost possessively. "Because I don't like sharing, and I don't want anyone else looking at you, or you looking at anyone else like that." I nodded, feeling a rush of affection despite the way my stomach twisted at his intensity. I loved him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this dynamic could easily become overwhelming. Still, as I looked into his eyes, I couldn't help but think that I would do anything to keep him by my side. 4 months later. It was late and I was sitting on the edge of our bed, staring at the wall, lost in my thoughts. Drake had just finished a long day at work and was pacing the room, his energy palpable. I could see he was stressed, his jaw clenched and his brow furrowed. "Harper, I need you to understand something," he said, stopping abruptly to face me. "You can't stay out with your friends so late without telling me. You know how I feel about that." I looked at him surprised. "But I was just going to grab coffee with Mia. It's not a big deal." He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "It is a big deal. I don't want to worry about you. You're too important to me." I felt a pang of guilt at his words, but I also felt a tightness in my chest. "I'm not a kid, Drake. I love spending time with you, but I also want to have my own life, Drake. I don't want to feel like I'm in a cage." His expression darkened for a moment, and he took a deep breath, his muscles tensing. "You think I'm trying to cage you? I just care about you. You don't understand how it feels to think something might happen to you." "I get it, but I can't live my life in fear," I replied, my voice shaking slightly. "Fear? I'm not trying to scare you," he said, his tone softening, but there was still an undercurrent of intensity. "I just need you to know that you belong to me. I want you safe." I looked down, feeling the weight of his words. There was a part of me that was intimidated by his passion, but I couldn't deny that I loved the way he cared. "I know you love me," I said quietly, Then don't push me away, he said, stepping closer, his eyes searching mine. You're mine, and I'll do anything to protect you. I nodded slowly, accepting the truth in his words. I loved him fiercely, even if his intensity sometimes left me feeling unsettled. In that moment, I understood that I was in deep, and despite the fear, I didn't want to leave. I was tangled up in his words, and for now, that was enough. A year later. We had been together for quite a long time now. Despite my resistance to accept, I was deep in for this man. So much so that I had started imagining our future together. Now imagine my disappointment when I realized that he had no plans of making things public. Not in a very long time indeed. I liked our secret mystery, but deep down I also craved the reassurance that came with being official. When the world knew I was his and he was mine. I remember discussing this with him and well, it didn't go the way I wanted. We were sitting in his penthouse watching a movie when I touched the subject. Drake, can we talk? I asked, my voice steady but soft. He looked up from his phone, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Sure. What's on your mind? Why can't you tell your parents about us? I blurted out, feeling a mix of frustration and hurt. Or even your friends. I told you, it's just not the time yet, he said, clearly annoyed. Why? You want me to be yours, but you don't want the world to know? Are you ashamed of me? His expression shifted, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. It's not like that, Harper. My family doesn't really understand this kind of stuff. I don't want to deal with their judgment right now. That sounds like a lame excuse to me, I shot back, anger bubbling to the surface. If you really loved me, why wouldn't you want to share that with your family? With literally anyone else? Because it's complicated, he snapped, running a hand through his hair. You don't know how they are. I just want to keep things simple for now. Simple? You think hiding me is simple? I replied, my voice rising. You're living in a bubble, Drake. I don't want to be your secret anymore. He took a step closer, trying to calm the situation. Okay. I promise I'll figure it out. Let's just not get into this right now. How about I whip up that pasta you love? I was caught off guard by his sudden shift in energy. Yeah, just forget about all this for a moment, he said, his eyes softening as he stepped closer, wrapping his arms around me. As he pulled me into his embrace, I could feel the warmth radiating from him, and for a brief moment, I let myself relax, but deep down his words lingered in my mind. Was he really just trying to keep me hidden? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, even as the comfort of his touch enveloped me. 6 months later. I don't think I can do it anymore, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It sounded shaky even to me, and I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince more, him or myself. I had just handed in my resignation, and the weight of it was crushing. Drake's expression darkened, and in a flash he grabbed my wrist, pinning me against the door. His mouth crashed into mine hard, intense, desperate, like he was trying to erase everything I'd said, branding me with a kiss that felt like he was holding on for dear life. When he finally pulled back, my head was spinning, my lips bruised and tingling. He looked at me, and the command in his voice sent a shiver through me. Don't ever say that again, he growled. You're not allowed to leave me. Not now, not ever. His words cut through me, leaving me breathless and shaken. I could feel the weight of them sinking deep, and part of me knew he meant every syllable. But as much as I loved him, God, I did. I felt trapped, torn between this fierce connection and the nagging feeling that I couldn't keep going like this. Not anymore. Flashback ends. No, Drake, I said, shaking my head as I tried to push him away. I can't. You don't understand. You can't keep doing this. Why? He asked, his voice low but filled with desperation. I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, blurring my vision. Because I love you, I managed to choke out. I fell in love with you, even knowing there may be no future with you. I fell for you, and it hurts too much. Drake's expression shifted slightly, his brows furrowing in confusion. It's not like we don't have a future. I have feelings for you too, and I want to be with you, he insisted. But you are broken, I retorted, feeling the heat rise in my chest. I don't even know why. You have issues. I don't doubt your love, not for a second, but you're too scared to be in love, Drake. This possession, this need to control and hide, all comes from fear, and fear and love cannot exist together. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. I could see the wheels turning in his head, but he didn't know what to say. I don't blame you for anything, I continued, feeling a mix of sadness and relief wash over me. But I just can't do it anymore, so please, don't contact me again. With that, I turned and walked out of the office, my heart heavy but somehow lighter at the same time. I could feel Drake's eyes on me, but I didn't look back. I needed to walk away, even if it felt like tearing a piece of my heart out in the process. 3 months later. It had been 3 long months since I walked away from Drake, and every day felt heavier than the last. I was drowning in a sea of pain, grief, and doubt, wondering if I had made the right choice. He had tried to contact me countless times, leaving messages and making calls, but I couldn't allow myself to be that weak. I had to stay strong, even if it felt like I was breaking inside. The new city didn't feel like home. My job was okay, but I didn't talk much with my coworkers, and life just trudged on without me. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. Today, as I opened my door to leave for work, I froze in shock. There stood Drake, looking as intense and handsome as ever. "How did you find me?" I blurted out, my heart racing. "It's nice to see you too," he replied, a small smirk on his lips that didn't reach his eyes. I stepped back instinctively, retreating into my apartment until I hit the furniture. I stumbled, but he was there to catch me, his hand steadying me, sending a jolt through my body. For a moment, the world around us faded, and all I could focus on was him. But then reality crashed back, and I regained my composure. "What are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. I asked you not to contact me." "I know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I tried. The day I saw you crying, it felt like knives to my heart, knowing I was the reason you were hurting. I thought it would be better if you were away from me, so I tried to stay away. I really did. But I couldn't. I can't. I need you, Harper. I want you. I love you." His words hit me like a wave, overwhelming and crashing into my chest. "I'm ready to work on myself," he continued, stepping closer. "I've been doing therapy. You were right that day. I have issues. 2 failed marriages do that to a person. I lost my first wife to an accident. I couldn't save her. My second wife was cheating on me for 3 years and I had no idea. Had I paid more attention, I would have. Please understand. I'm terrified of losing you too. My parents won't easily accept you, and I'm afraid that if I fight too much, I might lose them too. I know I try to control too much, but it's because I'm scared of losing it all." His eyes were pleading, full of hope and desperation. "But enough. I'm ready to work on it. For you. I will change. Please, just give me a chance." My heart ached at his words, a mix of longing and fear flooding through me. I was overwhelmed, and I didn't know what to do anymore. So I did the only thing that made sense in that moment. "Please just go," I said, my voice trembling. I hated myself for saying it, but I felt like I had no choice. It was all too much, and I couldn't deal with it right now. Drake's face fell, heartbreak evident in his eyes, but he didn't argue. "Okay," he said softly. He turned to leave, and I closed the door behind him, slumping against it as the tears finally spilled over. I cried, my heart shattered into a million pieces, wondering if I would ever find a way to put it back together again. 2 weeks later. It had been 2 weeks since I told Drake to leave, and every day felt like a battle against my own heart. I thought about calling him constantly, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't have the right to blame him for anything when I was the one who had been so scared of allowing myself to dream that maybe everything he said was true. Maybe things could really be good. Maybe he could change, and I could get everything I had always wanted. I shook my head to dismiss those thoughts as I left my apartment and headed toward the office. The city felt strangely dull today, the overcast sky matching my mood. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept drifting back to him. As I approached the city square, I heard a familiar voice. My heart skipped a beat. I looked up at the massive screen in the square, and there he was, Drake, live at a press conference. My breath hitched in my throat as I watched him, looking as handsome as ever, confidence radiating off him like a warm glow. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady but passionate. "Today I want to share something very personal." The crowd murmured, and I could feel my heart racing as I leaned in closer to hear. "I'm bisexual. Right now I'm in love with someone, a man. This person means the world to me, and if he does me the honor, the world will soon get to meet my better half." I felt a rush of emotions flood through me. Hope, disbelief, excitement. Was he really talking about me? As if reading my mind, he pulled out his phone right there in the middle of the conference. My phone rang simultaneously, and I glanced down to see his name lighting up the screen. "Drake," I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. I answered quickly, barely able to contain my excitement. "Hey, Harper," his voice came through, warm and inviting. "Do you believe me now?" "Yes," I breathed, a smile breaking across my face. "Good," he replied, his tone lightening. See you soon. With that, he hung up. I stood there frozen in disbelief, when suddenly a car pulled up beside me. The driver stepped out and approached. Excuse me, are you Harper? He asked. Yes, I replied, still reeling from the phone call. Drake sent me to take you to him, the driver said, a reassuring smile on his face. My heart raced with both excitement and nervousness. I hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. Getting into the car, the drive felt surreal, my mind racing with thoughts of what Drake might have planned. The city soon faded into the background as we drove further away, and I began to wonder where we were headed. The car finally stopped at a beautiful, secluded beach. I stepped out, the salty air hitting my face, and I felt a flutter of fear mixed with anticipation. I looked around, taking in the scenery. Golden sand, gentle waves, and a soft breeze. It was beautiful, but where was Drake? I walked a little closer to the shoreline, searching for any sign of him. Then I noticed something ahead. A stunning setup with delicate curtains swaying in the wind, adorned with vibrant flowers. I approached slowly, my heart racing. I could hear the sound of waves crashing nearby, but my focus was entirely on what lay ahead. As I stepped inside the flower-filled area, I gasped in surprise. There, standing in the middle of the setup, was Drake. He looked more stunning than ever, even though he clearly rushed here directly from the conference. Drake! I exclaimed, rushing forward and wrapping my arms around him in a tight hug. I missed you, he murmured into my ear, holding me close. I'm so sorry for everything. Sorry? I pulled back slightly to look at him. You don't have to be sorry. Shh, he interrupted, gently placing a finger on my lips. Just listen. He knelt down, taking my hands in his, and my heart raced. Harper, these past few weeks have been the hardest of my life, and I realize that I can't live without you. I've been working on myself, and I want to be better for you. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I felt tears welling up in my eyes as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart skipped a beat. Harper, he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Will you marry me? Time seemed to stand still. I was overwhelmed by joy, love, and disbelief. Yes, I shouted, the word escaping my lips before I even fully processed the question. Yes, yes, yes! He grinned, slipping the ring onto my finger, and in that moment everything felt right. He stood up, pulled me into another embrace, and kissed me deeply, sealing our promise. Now you're forgiven, he said, pulling back slightly and looking into my eyes. We both laughed, the sound echoing over the gentle roar of the waves. I was finally home, wrapped in his arms and ready to start a new chapter together. In that beautiful moment, surrounded by flowers and the sea, I knew we could make it through anything as long as we were together. 3 months later, I was out grooving to my favorite song with my best friend, Mia. It was her birthday after all. Suddenly, my phone flashed with a message, which made me realize it was 3 a.m. I opened my phone to see the message from my favorite person in the world. It was Drake. I have left dinner in the microwave and a hot water bottle for your feet on your side of the bed. I know your legs are going to be aching from that dancing you must be doing right about now. I have an early meeting tomorrow, so good night, baby. Have fun. Be safe. I'll be waiting for you to come home and wrap me in your arms around me while I sleep. Love you. God, this man. Only he can make me blush on a dance floor. I know it is widely believed that people don't change, but look at my man and how far he had come. Conclusion. Soon after, Drake and I had a beautiful wedding surrounded by our closest friends and family. It took a little time to convince his family, but soon they came around. It felt surreal to finally be standing there together, exchanging vows and promising to support each other through thick and thin. After the ceremony, we celebrated with laughter, dancing, and endless joy. As we settled into married life, we talked about our dreams for the future, traveling the world together, starting a family, and continuing to build our careers side by side. With Drake by my side, I felt stronger and more confident than ever. Our journey wasn't always easy, but together we could face anything. I was excited about the life we were building, knowing that love would always guide us home.